weeks ago, I shared that I'm working on some new content, and today I want to talk about a little bit about what I've learned. I am specifically doing a deep dive into productivity, and I'm looking specifically for productivity around knowledge workers, which is what most of us are in today's world. We spend a lot of time with information, connecting with people, communicating. Most of us don't do so much in the manual labor department. And yet the origins of productivity was with manual labor and production, factory work, making things. The first thing that I learned that was fascinating is that there is very little research on productivity for the knowledge worker. There's a lot on the original manual labor and production and very little on what most of us do today. There's a little bit though, and there are things that we can learn from that. So let me share what I've learned so far and a couple of things that I think really are worth us giving some thought to in terms of our own productivity. So the first one is, in the 1800s, they did research. The research that I read about was, what is the optimum load of a shovelful of, say, coal for a worker? And what they were interested in is two components. For the worker to be able to work a full shift, whatever that full shift was. So in other words, not to tire too easily and to lessen the risk of physical injury. So they did research on this. Fascinating, right? And they learned that 21 pounds was the optimum weight of what they should be shoveling and throwing for those two considerations. And then people went forward and made shovels that would hold approximately 21 pounds, right? It makes sense. So what does this have to do with us today? Most of us are not earning our living through manual labor. And yet there is a component that they have determined in research that is relevant. That whole idea of the optimum load. Now then they were talking about weight of something that we were shoveling and throwing. Now we're talking about the optimal load of information. And that, interestingly enough, there is no research on. The research has concluded that it is an important metric and something to pay attention to, and yet we have no guidance as far as how do we know what our optimum load is. Now, I'm sure you're like me. We've noticed when we get to the end of our optimum load, if you will, typically we're fatigued, we're no longer productive. We probably recognize that maybe when we are scrolling through emails, because it's not at the end of our workday yet, and yet we have really lost our focus because it's too much. So what's the optimal amount? There is no research to guide us, although we know it matters. And if we really think about it, even before I read that research and before I shared with you that there was that research, we all know this. So here's the first tip that I have. This is something that I am doing, is really paying attention to when I am tired and fatigued. When is it? And notice it when I find myself doing the mindless tasks that is really about, I don't feel like I should be done working. There's more I need to do. And yet really I'm tired enough, not always physically, a lot of times it's mentally, that I'm not being productive and yet I don't feel like I should stop working yet. I think those are important clues. We know it's relevant. So really right now, it's on us as individuals to start paying attention. So that's my first suggestion. We know that there's a limit. We know that we have a zone of which we are performing at a high level, and then it drops off. What does that look like for us? And then the other thing I'm really interested in is, what can I do as a quick refresh? So when I start feeling that way, what can I do that helps me refocus, gives me a little bit of a break? The second thing that I've learned that I have found interesting. Now this could just be me, although I don't think so. When I go to do something in today's world, I generally am starting with thinking about technology. Now, sometimes my technology is as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. I'll use an example recently. I've started implementing Profit First system. It's from a book called Profit First into my business. And there is some different record keeping. And I started with, I'm going to use Excel. That seems to make sense for the record keeping. And as I created my first Excel sheet, and it really wasn't quite right, and then I adapted it, and it wasn't really quite right again, and I realized I don't know yet 100% what I want or need. So stop using tools. So I went back to paper and pencil. So this is one of the things that I find interesting. Even in today's world, or in particular in today's world, really the place to start for productivity is on the process, not technology. The starting point of productivity is to really be clear what we're trying to accomplish and what do we need to accomplish it. When we start adding in tools and technology before we really understand the basic process, generally we have distracted ourselves from the first task at hand. Technology and many tools are designed to optimize, to make something work faster, smoother, with less effort. That's optimizing a process. Until I understand the process, what I'm trying to accomplish, the tool just makes it more confusing. So rather than starting with a tool, the better place for us to start for greater productivity is to start with the process. What is it we're trying to accomplish, and what basically are the steps to accomplish it? Once we understand that, then we want to look to optimize. And the optimization section or period is where we want to start looking for technology and for other tools that will help us do it quicker, easier, and all that. So those are two things that I've learned as I've started doing my research into productivity for those of us who are knowledge workers. Pay attention to really what is the time limit? What is the capacity we have? And then if we run out of capacity before the end of our working day, or what we feel should be our working day, what can we do to refresh? What is a break that is effective as knowledge workers? And when do we need to take them? And the second thing is to remember that with all of the tools and technologies that we have, the most productive way for us to do things is to start first with the process. Without the tools and the technology, understand our process, and then look to those tools and resources as ways to optimize the process that we know is solidly built.